What's going on, guys? It's going to be our summary markets week 75. I am going to say that this week's watch list really isn't that long. There's not a lot of things that I'm watching this week. So what we're mainly going to focus on this week is I'm going to go over some sector analysis. We're going to look at all the big sectors that make up the market. We're also going to go over SPY, gold, oil, Bitcoin, Ethereum, like we always do. I'm also going to talk about some things that look okay that got some call flow last week. Let's start with the summary market. So we're going to start with SPY. SPY is looking a little toppy, to be honest, guys. SPY, Qs, they had a pretty strong week the past couple of weeks, but then the most recent week, it looked a little toppy. And you can see here on SPY, you had a nasty day on Friday, big red day on Friday. Came back to fill that gap where we marked it out on our chart around 431. So that gap has been filled. And we do have some gaps still below us around 425, 423, 421. So kind of a lot of support around that 50-day moving average. So it would not surprise me if SPY wanted to pull back here and test that 50-day and simultaneously fill those gaps, right? So it does look a little weak. There was a lot of bad news coming out this weekend on COVID and stuff. A lot of the Asian countries released new numbers, and their COVID cases are actually higher than the peak of the pandemic this year and last year. So some of those countries are really getting slammed with COVID cases, and some of them are because they are testing more. So you have to take that as you will. So obviously, if you test more, you're going to get more cases. But the rate at which you're seeing these spikes in cases is actually getting a little alarming. You're seeing a lot of countries like the UK and I think like France and Spain as well. They're trying to mandate vaccines, and they're getting protests and people don't like it. But they are doing that because you're seeing increase of cases, right? So when you see those cases go up, it's fear, right? It causes fear in the market. It's going to cause VIX to spike. It's going to cause people to be a little worried when they're investing, right? So I would be a little careful for this next week or two. If we keep seeing this bad news on COVID, it's most likely going to top out SPY and Qs locally. I'm not going to call for like a massive top. I'm not calling for a recession or anything ridiculous, but a local top could very well be being put in. The nasty day on Friday, if this is not quickly recovered, if we don't quickly recover like 436, then I would definitely say very likely going to come back down to retest the 50-day, fill these local gaps around 423 to 425. But if we do quickly reclaim that day on Friday, get back above like 437, we're still looking for that 440 to 441 final target on our fib. So keep an eye on that. But if it starts to break back below this like 429, 430, then I would definitely target the 50-day moving average. Now, I don't normally go over Qs on our summary markets, but I'm going to take a look at it here because I want to show you guys. This also looks very toppy, and Qs is very heavily weighted in the tech companies, the FANG companies, right? And if you look at those companies, which we're going to go over later in the video, but if you look at a lot of those companies, they also look like they are topping out a little bit. So a lot of them are coming back to like kind of retest trends, but some of them are breaking their trends, like Apple is. We're going to go over that later. So let's talk about Qs now. So Qs looks a little toppy here. Nasty day on Friday, nasty day on Thursday. If you can't quickly reclaim like 363 here, then I think Qs definitely can come back down to refill that gap. It already has been filled, but that still is a big support, kind of around 354. You lose that level, you could definitely come down to these lower gaps. So we have a gap here that has not been touched around like 348. And that's kind of like an inefficiency area because we have not tested that area before, right? So we gapped above that area and we've never touched that level before. So big inefficiency there. So if this does start to sell off, that would be the obvious target around 348. Okay, so keep an eye on that. But if it can quickly reclaim that Friday sell off, get above 363, you're probably looking for like 365 to 370. So keep an eye on that. Moving on to gold, looked a little weak. You had a strong week for the start of the week. Nice little breakout there. I think it was on Wednesday. Then it got a little toppy on Thursday and Friday. So It did not like the 50-day moving average. We talked about that in our last video, I believe, as your local target, local resistance. So we are topping out on that, excuse me, for the short term. If you can break below like 1810, probably going to come back down and retest this little accumulation high here around 1790, and then you break below that, we're going to retest the accumulation low around 1770, and then we're talking about getting back into this nasty range, okay? If you can break back above the 50-day and then look for around 1861. Looking at oil here, getting a little toppy as well. So across the board, guys, the markets don't look too good right now. It is bouncing on Friday, so you had a nasty sell-off, but it did have a nice recovery on Friday. If you can get back above like 73, then this looks a lot better. 72.50, 73. Then you're talking about getting towards like 76, 78. But if you get back below this 50-day moving average, below, what is that, like 69, then it's looking very weak. Most likely come back down to that range high around 66, and then you could get below that to like 64. All right. Moving on to Bitcoin, nothing has changed, guys. If you guys have been watching the analysis videos the past couple of weeks, nothing has changed. It's still selling off. You're still in this range. You have not been able to break the OTS trail, which is the dotted line here. You have not been able to break the 50-day moving average. They're both kind of lining up around 34 to 35,000 now. So that is your major resistance. That also lines up with a pivot, and that also lines up with the middle of the range. So massive resistance around 34 to 36. If you cannot reclaim that very soon, this is going to sell off much more rapidly. This is not going to continue to sell off slowly like this. We are going to see a capitulation event very soon if these buyers cannot get it above those levels, okay? So I would be very careful if you guys are in some very heavy long positions here on Bitcoin, because I've seen this time and time again. Bitcoin will do this thing where it like slowly goes down, and people are dollar cost averaging, right? So like the short-term guys who are dollar cost averaging, they think they're safe because it's going down slowly, but it's not going to keep going down slowly. This is just a trap, and they can quickly nuke this and kind of liquidate all those short-term traders, right? And if you're long-term, if you're dollar cost averaging long-term, then you don't care. If it liquidation's down, then you can just pick up the blood, right? But the short-term guys, they get killed, right? So keep an eye on that. If you are a short-term bull, I would be very, very careful. If you cannot quickly get back above like 32.5, then the sell-off is going to start getting faster and faster until you break that range low and start liquidating people, okay? The biggest support below you is around 25 to 23, so you have plenty of room to fall, okay? Now, I don't want to be completely bearish. It doesn't look awful just yet, but there is nothing really bullish about this chart. So the only thing that you could really say that looks slightly bullish is you could almost call this a bulldog, where you have a double bottom coming in with a curved back, right? So you could predict a bulldog here, where it pops up, maybe hits these levels, creates a very small head, and then pops back higher into the range high. But that's a lot of hope, right? That's a lot of predicting. A lot has to happen properly for that to play out. So I wouldn't get too happy about that. One thing you could also look for is watch this trend here. If you can break that trend, that would be the first warning that the buyers are getting a little stronger. So keep an eye on that. But you can't get above that trend very soon. Within like this week, that liquidation event is probably coming. So be careful, guys. Moving on to Ethereum, basically take everything I just said on Bitcoin, and it's the same exact thing on Ethereum. Now, one thing I will say about Ethereum is it does look slightly more bullish. So you do have like this support that is currently holding on Ethereum. So this double bottom has a higher chance of playing out than it did on Bitcoin. So keep an eye on that. That's actually a double pivot. It's hard to see, but if you zoom in, there's a pivot here and there's a pivot there on basically the same level. So very strong support there. The buyers are trying to hold that level around 1900. If you lose that level, get below like 1850, 1820, there really is not a whole lot of support until like 16 to 1500. Okay, so you could sell off pretty rapidly. Same thing here. to get the first warning that this is getting more bullish, keep an eye on these trends. It really depends on where you're taking the trend. You can take kind of the bodies or the wicks. It doesn't really matter. They're kind of lining up in the same area. You basically have to get above like 2200 to start looking bullish. If you can break 2200, then we're talking about getting to 25 to 29. Okay? But all right, that was the summary of markets. Make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe if you guys like the content. We are going to continue now with the watch list. So, like I said earlier, guys, the watch list is very, very slim this week. There's not a whole lot that I'm watching. The things that I was watching, I can't talk this week, guys. Disney I was watching. We had a pullback here to like 178. Had a nice little bounce on the end of the day on Friday, but it didn't really hold that level. If it can bounce here, this actually looks like a beautiful bulldog. So you have the bottom here, double bottom, pop up, and then pull back. So if this holds here, this is actually textbook. This looks beautiful, but it cannot go any lower. This is it. This is the bottom that has to be put in, okay? So watch for it to bounce here. If it bounces around 179, then this could be a beautiful retrace back into like 188, and then you could get like 194, all right? So keep an eye on that. If it gets below like 178, you have a little bit of support at 176 based on the fib, and then if you get below that, most likely going to retest the double bottom here. You lose that double bottom, it's dead. A lot of room to fall, okay? So keep an eye on that. Snow was another one that I was watching, but it lost the level here. If it can quickly reclaim 253, and then we're looking for like 266. Baba played out beautifully. If you guys watched the last week's video, we talked about waiting for a bounce on Baba. You were on a big support there around 200 to 204. Bounced off that level massively with a couple of gaps, but then we got a little toppy up here. So that is an evening star. So you have a move up, doji, move down. That's pretty bearish. So you could definitely come back down to refill these gaps around 209 to 205. So watch for that. Maybe one more move down to retest that lower triangle before breaking out. Maybe like a push down, maybe a consolidation, and then go for a major breakout. As long as you hold that low of the triangle around 200, I think this is still mid to long-term bullish. Let me see. Do I have anything else here? LULU is failing the 377 level. Looking a little ugly here, but you still have a pretty strong trend. So you could take the wicks, which is a little extended. You could also take this local trend here. This one is actually being broken. But if it pulls back off of this 377 level back into this big trend here, this is a big failure here. So you have to wait for a nasty failure. But if it pulls back to that trend, a lot of things line up here. So if it can pull back to this trend, you have the 382 fib from the low here to the high, all right? You also have this kind of range high right here. So we have that resistance here that pulled us back, resistance there that pulled us back. That lines up with that 350 to 345 area as well. And that lines up with the trend, right? So if it pulls back to that area, that is where I'd be a buyer. Anywhere in between here, I'd be a little sketchy to buy that. But if it pulls back down to like 350, I would probably be a buyer down there. For the more bullish case, let me delete this here. The more bullish case would be breaking 380, hold above that. If you break the fake out level around 388, then we're talking to go see that breakout target around like 400, 415. This has a big move possible. It just has to find some more buyers before going higher. Square was one that I was watching, but you lost that 240 support, so I'm not really watching this anymore. If it can quickly bounce on like Monday or Tuesday, and get back above this trend and back above 240, maybe like 245, then this would look really good, okay? So reclaim 245 by Wednesday, I'd say. Then I'd be very bullish on Square. Maybe look for 250 and then break out into like this 257 area. MasterCard, another one that I'm watching. Nasty day on Friday. If it pulls back to retest like this high of the accumulation here, this could be very bullish. So any pullback down to like 380 to 375 would be a very good area to watch for support. Okay, so keep an eye on that. Now, before we go into the sector analysis, I want to go over a few things that were getting call flow last week. One of the big ones here was MRO. It was the $12 calls for August 6th. They were repeat calls, so they had like 5 different sweeps come in, all for that same strike, the $12 for August 6th. So keep an eye on that. What I think they're doing here for oil, this is an oil company, right? It's nasty, pulling back pretty hard. But if we go to oil here, oil is already trying to recover, and this is kind of a big support area. So if you look back to like this area here, even like these wicks, every time it dips down here, the buyers start to come in. So it's already bouncing a little bit, but Marathon is not bouncing. So I think they're anticipating that Marathon is kind of lagging the oil prices. That's the only thing that I could make out from that trade. The next one that we had was ATOS. These were actually deep in the money. They were buying the August 20th $2.50 strike, so way down here. They were buying deep in the money. But they were also buying some out of the money as well. This might be a different person. But some big size came in on July 30th, $6.50 strike. So pretty far out of the money. So it's kind of weird here. They have the far out of the money and the far in the money. Maybe they're making like an iron condor. So they want it to stay kind of below 650 but above 250. That would be my guess. Because I don't really see why you would buy these 250s that are that deep in the money when it's getting pretty bearish here. You're breaking a massive uptrend. You're performing like a head and shoulders. This does not look like something you would really put high confidence in to buy deep in the money there. Now, one thing they could be doing, and this is the problem, guys, with looking at options flow, we just don't know what their plan is. We just see what they're executing. We don't know what their plan is. But what they could be doing is they could be buying these 250s because they want to get exercised, right? Or sorry, they want to get assigned. They want to exercise the contracts so they can get those shares, right? That is a possibility as well. So they might not care if this dips down because they just want the shares, right? So that could be a possibility as well. Now, finally, the biggest call flow that we saw come in on Friday was MYNA. 2.7 million premium came in on October 15th, $300 calls. So pretty far out of the money. Let's see, that's about 5% of the money, so not too far. But if this does pull back to fill that gap, then those people who bought those calls, they're going to get buried very, very quickly. Because any kind of pullback and their delta is going to get pretty much to the point of no return. It's going to go low and it's not going to be able to recover. So keep an eye on that. But what I will say is with all the bad news that we've been seeing in COVID, like I talked about in the beginning of the video, these vaccine companies, MYNA specifically, they have been doing pretty well. MYNA is one of the most ridiculous gainers of the past 2 years, obviously because of their vaccine. But if we look at this on like a weekly or monthly chart, this thing is just disgusting. You are actually forking off of these massively bullish trends. Like we had this really bullish trend start to form. We already forked off of it, and it looks like it's getting ready to fork again. So very, very bullish on MYNA. It's hard to buy it up here because it's very extended. But any kind of pullback to like the 240 to 200 area, there is a massive amount of support there with fundamentals to back it. So keep an eye on that. Now, before we get into big tech, I wanted to cover some of the sectors here because our watch list was a little slim. Now, what I will say, guys, is the markets, even you'll see this when I go over the sectors here, most of these sectors also look a little toppy. So I would not be surprised if we see a local top here. I'm pretty much out of most of my positions. My short-term portfolio is only in, what is it? It's in Coinbase, which is not even... It's not even short-term. I'm holding that for at least a year. But I did buy that in my short-term portfolio, so I'm holding that in that portfolio. But it is a long-term trade. Besides that, I'm only holding a UUP dollar hedge, which is no longer a hedge because the positions that I was hedging are closed. So I am holding a bullish dollar position with the UUP contracts. That is it. That's all I have right now. So my portfolio is pretty much all in cash. And until the market starts to look a little better, I'm most likely going to be holding mainly cash. But let's get started with sectors. So the SMH sector, this is the semiconductor ETF. Nasty pullback last week. You had a couple of the semiconductors doing very well with NVIDIA, AMD, Micron. They were doing very well, TSM, but they topped out pretty hard. So nasty pullback on SMH. It could pull back to probably like 240, but until it breaks like 265, not looking too good, okay? The energy sector is starting to get wrecked as well. Oil started to pull back. OPEC had a couple of meetings. They couldn't really decide on anything bullish. So energy has been getting hit. So once again, not looking too good. If we look at this trend that we've been in way back from like October, we're breaking this trend. No matter where you draw this trend line, it is being broken. So if we look at horizontals, there's one key area right here. Let's see if you guys can spot this. Right here. You see how it was resistance, and then it acted as support, and now we're coming back to retest that level. Okay, so that is the biggest level on the energy sector right now. So if we pull back to retest like 47 and it starts to bounce off that level, I would keep an eye on all the oil stocks and the other big energy names. Okay, so watch out for that. And gold, I'm not really going to talk about. We already talked about gold. The tech sector, this is looking very toppy, and we're going to go over the big tech companies once we're done with the sectors, and you'll see why this sector is looking so toppy. Now, if it can bounce right on Monday or Tuesday, this doesn't look too bad, actually, because it's actually retesting the trend, but it has to bounce immediately. It cannot see another red day. If it has another red day, this trend will be broken, okay? If it does break the trend, there is one key level, and it's right here on that local high. You had that resistance come in, then the resistance again, and then we broke out of it and saw that massive run. So if you do break the trend here, this could get ugly and fall back like another 4% to 144. Okay, so watch out for that. Communication sector, this also has been on an insanely strong trend from the lows. And you can draw a couple of trend lines here. Like we can draw this trend line. That's probably the strongest one on the chart. And we're actually coming back to retest that. So once again, if this bounces early, like say before Wednesday, this doesn't look too bad. But if you see another red day on Monday or Tuesday that pushes this below that trend, you really have not broken this trend since the lows. You tried to break it for one day in May, and you quickly recovered. So breaking this trend would be pretty scary for the communication sector and for the tech sector, because communications and tech typically run together. Next on the list is the financial sector. This is also a scary one, because look at this big level here. You can see that you're acting as support, tried to bounce high. This is a weak high. You see how you try to break out, but then it doesn't really go anywhere, and then it just consolidates and pulls back. That's a weak high. So you formed a weak high, pulled back to lose that support, then we came back to retest that level as resistance, and now we're having a nasty rejection from that level. This is not good, okay? So if it cannot quickly reclaim like 37, this is very, very bad. The financial sector has a very heavy weighting on the biggest ETFs, okay? So if this sector starts to sell off, I would be very worried that we are starting to come into a local top. Now, you do have a little bit of support here around 36. It could just be a gap fill. If you start to lose 36, this is not good. This will start to lead the biggest ETFs downward, okay? Next up is real estate. This has also been on an absolute tear. We can take like this local trend here, and you can see how we're currently testing that. So once again, if this bounces early, it's not looking too bad. But if we break that trend, not looking too good. This could be a cup and handle, where we have that kind of cupping pattern, and then we form the handle. So it could pull back to retest the trend and then rip off of it. So as long as that trend holds, the real estate sector should stay strong. All right, keep an eye on that. Next up is materials. This is getting wrecked as well. So we had a little bit of distribution here. Distribution broke bearishly. Then now we're accumulating. So we have an accumulation off of that impulse. So impulse down and now accumulation. Now it looks like the accumulation wants to break bearishly. So this is pretty bad. Distribution into a bearish impulse into a bearish accumulation. This is very bad. This means that this next impulse can be very, very bloody, right? So watch out for that. If we break that range low there around like 177, this could get very bloody very quickly, and that's for materials. So keep an eye on that. The Dow Jones, this is what I look at obviously for like the industrial sector. This is holding this trend for now. If you break that trend, this could go for a gap fill around 344, and then there's another gap around 340. So keep an eye on that. This doesn't look awful, but that day on Friday was very bad. So if you don't quickly bounce on Monday, I would be a little worried. Another sector that does not look too good is infrastructure. We had basically a weak high, put in a weak high, put in a retest of the weak high, and then failed. So we had that nasty failure there. And then if you look at this level right here, tried to act as support, put in that double top, and now we're acting as resistance. This is very bad. This is what you would consider like a markdown. Like the value is getting much lower. So like if we look at something like this, this was the initial value, right? The value of the top here. Now if we take another one for this one here, look at how much lower the value is on this. So the POC went from 36 down to 35, which is a pretty big move in this ETF. It's a slow mover. And then we have the value area completely shifting lower. So this is pretty bad. This is a markdown, right? If it can't get above 36, this is going to go much lower. There's a gap fill around 33.50, and then there's a little bit of support down here around 32. Moving on to utilities. This is actually one of the only sectors that looks decent right now. You had a really strong day on Thursday. Nice continuation on Friday. But look at this here. If we take this trend line, it's just barely breaking it. So this could be a fake out, okay? If it doesn't maintain above this trend for at least a few days, this could be a fake out, and you could send back down to like 64, all right? So watch out for that. If it fails that trend, not looking too good. This could be kind of like a broadening wedge, and it's just kind of faking you out here, all right? But if it does maintain above that, watch for around like 68. Moving on to healthcare. This is actually probably the strongest sector right now, mainly due to MYNA and the other vaccine companies, okay? If we take a trend here, we are still maintaining that trend. If it can stay above 128, this actually doesn't look too bad. If you can break above this little high right here, above like 129, 129.50, this could actually go for a breakout. So keep an eye on that. Next up is consumer staples. This is also not doing too bad. You're seeing a lot of higher lows come in here throughout the past couple weeks, and then we saw that final breakout this week. So we had a nice little breakout on Wednesday, and then nice continuation on Thursday. Little toppy on Friday, kind of hitting that resistance up here. If you can break above like that high on Friday, 71.50-ish, then this could go for a run. So watch out for that. Retail does not look too good. I actually closed this. We were in a retail trade. I closed it break even. We were looking for a breakout. Once it put in that not fake high, once it put in that weak high, I pulled out, right? We pulled out at break even. Didn't want to take a loss on that. You're kind of breaking your trend here as well. Kind of a nasty trend line, but no matter where you draw it, you're breaking the trend. So not looking too good. This looks very much like a rollover top, where you tried to push higher, but you're kind of rolling over. It's weakening, right? So watch this here. You could just keep weakening until you go back down to that original value, kind of around 80, all right? So watch out for that. A little toppy. Break below like 90. It's looking pretty weak. All right, last but not least is the consumer discretionary sector. This also looks toppy. This is a weak high because if you take this little impulse right here, or you could take the one from down here, they both will look pretty weak. You see how you just barely broke the fake out level and then instantly rejected it? That's not good. So that little fake out level around 182 is kind of telling you that this is a weak high. It's not a strong impulse. So you're already back below your breakout point. So very likely could come back down to that Fibonacci support around 172 to 168. All right. So keep an eye on that. So like I said, guys, out of all of these, how many did I say looked good? Like 2 of them, maybe 3? That's not too good. That means the market is looking a little toppy. Now, I would not say it's topping already because, like I said, a lot of those sectors, they did look like they were holding their trends and they only needed to see a nice little day on Monday or Tuesday and it would actually be a nice trend bounce. So we're not topped just yet, but if this week is as bloody as like Friday was, then it's looking pretty bad. Most of those trends are going to be broken. All right. So let's close it off with big tech. Let's go over all the big tech companies before we close it down. So Microsoft, basically exactly what I just said on the sectors, it has to bounce immediately. You cannot see a red day on Monday or Tuesday, or it will be breaking this trend. Okay, and it has not broken this trend since it created it like way back here in the middle of June. All right, this is a very, very strong trend, and this is mainly why SPY has been doing so well overall, was because Microsoft and Apple were holding the entire market up. We were seeing, I had a couple guys ask me on stream, they were asking me, why is SPY doing well when most of the stuff on my watch list is doing bad? Like all the smaller names and stuff are getting wrecked. Take a look at IWM, for example. If you look at the Russell, the small caps are getting destroyed, right? And if it loses this trend, which it looks like it's going to, this could get very bloody very quickly. So going back to what I was saying, they were asking me like, why is SPY doing well when all these companies are doing bad? And it's mainly because SPY is heavily weighted in these big tech companies. Microsoft and Apple are their 2 biggest holdings of SPY, right? So they were kind of holding SPY up, even though all these smaller names are getting destroyed. So if they start to sell off with the smaller names, there's nothing left to hold SPY up. You guys see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to scare you or trying to make you very bearish. I'm just giving you guys my thoughts on what could happen here. So if Microsoft loses this trend and Apple loses this next trend, you've already lost the most bullish fork here. You still have a couple trends here that are maintaining. If it loses this next trend, like you break below like 144, this is going to look very toppy for SPY. Okay, so watch out for that. Facebook is also on a big support. If you lose this 339 support, this could go all the way back down to 330, 327. All right, so not a whole lot of support below 339. You got a little bit at like 337. If this can get back above 350, then we're talking about like 358. Another big name getting wrecked, Netflix. You finally filled that gap. I told you guys way back in June that if you wanted to take that gap fill play, Netflix fills every single gap. It's the easiest trades on the market, right? So that 550 level has been filled, and now we're actually going right back down to fill the next couple of gaps, and it's doing it a lot faster than it took to fill that upper gap. This gap took 85 days. It took you 85 days to fill that upper gap, and then look at this. It's almost going to take you like maybe a couple weeks to fill these lower gaps. So keep an eye on that. 520 to 512, those levels will be filled. It's just a matter of time, right? Next up is Amazon. Nasty week last week as well. One thing I will say about Amazon, it's coming into a big support. So you had this like massive high for the past year that we put in a lot of resistance. We finally broke out of that resistance, and now we're coming back to retest it as support. Okay, so this could be a very big level for Amazon. If you can hold above like 35.50, then we're talking about seeing 36.60 to 3700. All right. Now, if it breaks that high it's going to sell off very rapidly down to 3,400. All right. All right, I thought this week's video was going to be short. Sorry, guys, it's actually kind of long. Let's close it off with Tesla here. Tesla also looking a little weak. You failed that 689 resistance, got back below the 666 pivot, and now we're going back to the 628 pivot. If it breaks that 628 pivot, it's looking very, very weak, and you could see a massive impulse back below this nasty downtrend that we were in for the past almost a year. Okay, so it really does not. It really needs to hold 628. Okay, if it gets back above 666, then just look for that same level, 690, and then 711. All right, guys, so that's it. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, like the video if you guys like this watch list, and I will be seeing you guys tomorrow for our live trading session at 9:30 in the morning for the scanner stream, and then 3 p.m. Eastern for the analysis stream. If you guys are in Discord, I'll see you at 9:30 in the morning. Peace out, guys.